Hello and welcome to another video. Now, in this video, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be exploring the Intel Core 2 Quad. And what I mean by that is that I'm going to see if you can still game on a Core 2 Quad in 2020. Now, a few months ago, I did a video on gaming on a Core 2 Duo, and that video wasn't that well put together, but yeah, it's my most popular video. So, decided to follow it up with a Core 2 Quad video. Now, without further ado, let's talk about which Core 2 Quad we're going to be using, and then let's get on to some performance benchmarks. So now let's go ahead and talk about the Core 2 Quad that we're going to be using. Now, yes, I know in these B-roll shots, or whatever they're called, I'm showing a Xeon dual core, and the reason is because I was too lazy to wipe off the thermal paste just to get some fancy shots with the Core 2 Quad. So, pretend that Xeon is a Core 2 Quad, but we actually do use a real Core 2 Quad for the testing. But the Core 2 Quad that we're going to be using is the Q6700, which is a 4-core, 4-thread CPU at 2.66 GHz that launched about 10 plus years ago. Now let's talk about the rest of the components that we're going to be using for this setup. If you watch the Core 2 Duo video, it is pretty similar. We're going to be using the same ASUS motherboard, and instead of 6 GB of RAM like last time, we are now using 8 GB, so we won't get any weird stuttering issues in some games due to not having enough RAM. We're going to be using the same 240 gig SSD, and we're going to be using the same GTX 1060. Alright, I've put it all together and I now have the test setup all done, and I did take the time to put the motherboard and the power supply on cardboard boxes instead of the floor so that I don't get yelled at by you viewers. Without further ado, let's go ahead and do the most exciting part of the video, and that is the benchmarking. Now, I will be comparing the Core 2 Duo and the Core 2 Quad gaming performances up on screen at the same time. Use the same settings for both so that there is some consistency. So, without further ado, let's begin.
Put your hands in the air for carbon.
Long live the champion.
Arriba,
Campeón. Yeah, Southside, Southside. Arriba, campeón. Oh yeah.
luchando campeón.
Singing my song.
Arriba, campeón. Arriba, campeón.
Long live the champion. I do it for the culture. I take it global. I've been moreno, papi loco since Ocho Ocho. I like dance on the low, low. It's in my torso. I got fire like some cultures. Get in my ojos. Okay, okay. We don't walk away in my go day. No way am I gonna leave. Oh no, not today. Do not behave in blood is on the league. Weep before you speak, though. Think before you eat. How you love a country food more than its people. Cause I think you hide behind your politics. You do not want answers, you want arguments. Okay, yes, I love the kingdom more than I love my nation. Yeah, yes, I love my neighbor more than I love his papers. Okay, okay, still alive, but we thrive, we don't, do not die. Coming live from the Citadel, I was made alive in the big fail when Washington fell, still hit a Denzel. Love, till we live well, we gon' play the role real well.
Levanta tu cabeza y sigue caminando.
So now let's go ahead and talk about the gaming performance that we just saw. Now, in Minecraft, what might surprise you is that the Core 2 Quad actually did worse than the Core 2 Duo. I originally thought that Minecraft would prefer more cores and threads, but I guess it prefers the 2 faster cores instead of the 4 slower cores. But other than that, they both ran pretty well on this system. Now, in BeamNG Drive, I made a little mistake with the Core 2 Quad, and that is that I accidentally ran the game at 1600 by 900 instead of 1280 by 720 like the Core 2 Duo. But as you can see, even though it's running in 1600 by 900, the Core 2 Quad does still average out more frame rate than the Core 2 Duo, which is not surprising. This is a fairly intensive CPU game, and whenever you start up the game, it does say that a quad core is optimal for the best performance. But both systems could play this game perfectly fine. Next is CSGO, and on the Core 2 Duo, the game, you could get away with playing with it, but it really wasn't that great of an experience. There were some decent stutters that would happen that would make the gameplay a lot worse. But on the Core 2 Quad, with an average FPS of 46, you could get away with playing this casually. Playing competitive is probably not a good idea on a Core 2 Quad, but if you were going to play casually, I guess you could get away with playing this game on a Core 2 Quad. Next is Fortnite, and my god was it bad. On the Core 2 Duo, even though the average frame rate is higher, it couldn't actually load in any textures even if you had it on 480p. It just wouldn't load any textures in for me. But on the Core 2 Quad, once you actually land on the ground, the textures do actually load, but maybe it was just something I was doing, but it was super unstable. It crashed about 3 different times. Actually, it crashed the whole computer, not just the game. And halfway through me playing the game, my keyboard inputs quit working, so only thing I could do was walk around. I couldn't move my mouse because that didn't work either. The only thing I could do was move around. Couldn't shoot, couldn't do any of that. So this was terrible. Both systems were definitely way too underpowered to play Fortnite. Now, Ghost Recon 2 is a bit of an older game. It came out around the time of the Core 2 Quad's release, which is why I can play it pretty much flawlessly on medium to high settings. I didn't test this on the Core 2 Duo, so that's why the max, average, and minimum frame rates are doo-doo poo. Another game that I tested on the Core 2 Quad and at the Core 2 Duo was Rise of the Tomb Raider, and it did okay at low settings. Got an average of around 35 FPS in the benchmark, so if you're okay with playing at 30 FPS, then you could technically play this game on a Core 2 Quad. Next is Unturned, which is a pretty basic free-to-roam style game, but the graphics in it are pretty simple, so that's why the Q6700 can average over 60 FPS. The final game we benchmarked was World of Tanks, and it's actually a little more intensive than I thought it was, and yes, this is a brand new game that I'm going to be benchmarking fairly often, but essentially, we got an average of around 44 FPS, and the game was definitely playable. It didn't look that great because it was on low settings, but you could definitely play this game. Alright, so now that there is nobody watching, I get to rant about how my watch time averages under 2 minutes, which I don't understand. I don't know what I need to do to get the watch time higher than 2 minutes, but since everybody's gone, I might as well talk about the upcoming videos. I've got 2 videos in the works. One's on a newer system, one's on a pretty retro computer, but hope you guys enjoy this video. I don't know why I'm saying hope you guys enjoyed it, because there is nobody watching this part of the video because the watch time average is 2 minutes. So anyways, I'm just gonna stop the video.